Hey everybody, welcome back. We are on the teardown bench here, and it's quite a mess. There's a lot of stuff coming in. Got another T90 on the floor there. I've got transfer cases lined up, and I am working on these CJ5 large steering boxes. I talked about these last time, or the time before that, I'm not sure. These are the 15/16 shafts. M38-A1, CJ5, and I have, there's one there, got another one over there, got one here. I've got 4 of them apart to make 2 good ones, and I'll show you some little details and how I get there, and I'll show you some things when you think you're buying a good kit. I'll show you what you're going to have to deal with when you get that kit. And I've got a lot going on. I've got one box finished. I'll take you over there and show you that one. And I've got a lot to do here, but I've got a T90 on the tree there. Got a lot to do here, but we're going to get another one of these steering boxes finished. Got some parts soaking in this parts washer. Got T90 case in there that we've got to rebuild. So a lot of rebuilds happening lately. Things are going on. I've got a bench full of stuff here I've got to go through. I've got a T90C here, and the gears are in tough shape, so I've got to go through that one. And like I say, there's a lot going on, but let me take you over this way, and I will show you the finished box. You can see that's an original Pitman arm. I just polished up the end there, and I use the same wheel that I use when I'm making my Pullmax tooling. That deburring wheel right there, just in a simple grinder. Takes any marks or any scuffs or damage off that, polishes that up nice, and that's the completed steering box. And we have no play at all in the sector. And we have it adjusted just right, so we have a tiny bit of drag through the center, and we're free on the ends. And I showed that before in a video a long time ago, but we're going to go over it again and show you how to get these boxes built correctly. This one is already lubed and ready to go, so I can't tip it over, so I have to keep it standing upright. But this one is lubed and ready to go, and I'm going to get over to the bench and show you some details on how to put one of these together properly. Okay, this box has already been cleaned. It's already been through the parts washer. Everything's cleaned. I buffed up the Pitman arm. I always save original Pitman arms. Haven't seen a good one in years. Cap is clean. Everything is clean on that. When you take your box apart, these are the kind of bearings you're going to find in there. Got your little ball bearings in a cup, and you've got a different cup than normal, than any of the early boxes or anything like that. Don't when you're taking your box apart, don't just automatically throw all your parts away. Save as many original parts as you can if it's possible. Because they're better than any of the reproductions. And there's some guys saying that they're selling new old stock kits out there, but there's a lot of junk out there, so be careful. That's the cup you're going to get. This is the one that's in there. I hope you can see that alright. Try and get you in there. On this cup, it's nice and round. The ball bearings fit in there perfectly. This is the early style cup. You'll find it in a CJ2A, 3A, 3B. And they work. And it'll even work in this box here if you have to in a pinch, if everything's messed up. But when you put a ball bearing in there, you've got a tiny bit of bearing on the bottom and a tiny bit on the side. They're a little bit taller. They're not shaped right. If you have good cups, the only thing that really going to mess these up is water damage. If you have good cups, you can pop these ball bearings out, because some of these have a little bit of a scuffing on them. And you take your new ball bearings and you stick them right in there, and you'll have a good bearing set. Don't just automatically throw that stuff out, because this is much better than what you're going to get in your kit. So we're not going to use these in here. Like I said, I took 4 boxes apart, and I was able to come up with 2 nice cups, and I'll change the bearings out and we'll be in good shape. The next thing you're going to get in your kit are your bushings. Now, the original bushing was a split bushing. You see the split in there, I hope. Right there, there's a split in there. And you put that in and it would squeeze down and you ream it. These go in, and you still have to ream them. But your long one, the original had a hole in it, and it's got oil grooves in there. And it's the right size, and it goes in okay. It doesn't have any oil grooves in it, and I'm not too concerned about that. But what I am concerned about is there's no hole in there. Right in here you can see that hole. That hole takes oil and brings it down to your bottom bushing, which is down. The long one is always in the bottom. The long one goes in the bottom there. And with no hole there, less of a chance for lube getting there. So that's bad. Like I say, if these bushings are good, which this one is not, it's got some scoring in there. I can't use that one again. So I'm going to put this one in. I'm going to install it. We'll drive it in there. We'll take a long drill and we'll put a hole in there, and then we'll ream it. Now these upper ones, for some reason, they go in this side, and these are always loose. You see that? That's never going to work. You can't ream it. You can't. It's just going to spin in the case. It's going to ruin everything. That's not going to work. That's just too loose. It should be you have to hammer them in there. If it's doing that, then no good. So when I measured these guys, that's 1 inch. Let's see if you can see. Yeah, it's crazy in here. That's 1 inch 060. That's 1 inch 063 and a half. So there's the problem. You're getting 2 different size bushings. It's not going to work out. So basically the short one is junk. We're going to use the long one. We'll put that in, and again the long one goes down on that side. And I was able to, out of all the other bushings, I was able to salvage a very nice, no wear at all upper bushing. So those are going to go in next. And I will say, on this particular box, when I took it apart, oops, and a lot of guys ask me about this, this tube that holds the horn wire, this tube did come out. This guy here, it fell right out. And when I put that back in, I cleaned it real good. I took some of the Permatex Right stuff, put a bead in there, tap that back in, put a bead on the outside, and it'll be fine. Somebody on the other box, somebody had tried to braze that piece in, and they made a mess of it, so I had to grind all that junk off there, and it was just a mess. Don't try and braze it. Don't try and weld it in. You got a sheet metal piece there to cast iron box. It just won't go good. If you have to, you could silver solder it in there. That works pretty good, but it was still a pretty tight fit. A little bit of sealant in there, and that'll be fine. I'm going to take this over to the other bench, and we're going to knock these bushings in, and I'll show you how I do that. And like I say, just always be aware when you're taking these boxes apart. Like I say, try and save as much original stuff as you can, because what you replace it with is not going to be half as good as the original stuff. Okay, I'm going to go for after that that first long bushing. Like I say, it goes on this side, and this is what I like to use to drive them in. You could turn these on the lathe, or this is for this came with a kit for pulling carrier bearings off of differentials. So you put that in the hole, and then you put the jaw on there, and you can pull a bearing off. So I have a whole set of these in a lot of different sizes, but they're very easy to spin up on the lathe. Just get it kind of close to the size of your bushing. That way you don't mangle up your bushing when you're driving it in. So no right or wrong way, no up or down. Just put it in there, square it up. And when your bushing is flush there, you're all the way in. Now here's this one we saved, split bushing. That's going to go in this side. Okay, when it's flush right here, you know you're good. Now, we want to get lube down to this bushing. That's going to happen through that hole. So I'm going to set this up in a vise, and we're going to go and we're going to put a lube hole through there. It's just, I don't know why guys are even making these parts if they're making them so wrong, but they're out there. I need you guys to be aware that you have to get lube down there. So this is a critical step. If you're doing this, it is a critical step. Put that hole in there, let the lube flow down in there. That's the only way it's going to get down in there. It's going to have a very hard time getting through the upper bushing and down to the lower one. Put that hole in there. As the shaft is turning, a little bit of oil is going to go in there. It's going to pick it up, and it's going to constantly lube that bottom bushing. A critical operation, this next operation. Okay, this is kind of a tricky hole to drill because it's on an angle and only the corner of your drill is hitting. So go slow, and the drill might get bound up a little bit, but just go slow. Make sure you get that hole in there nice and square. You have the box to kind of guide the drill. It won't get away from you, but it'll be kind of a choppy cut. And that's all it takes. Critical to get that lube hole in there. It's in there now. Now we can go ahead and ream these. Okay, there's our box. It's a brand new sector shaft, new old stock from a long time ago. Beautiful piece. It'll go through our original bushing that's already been reamed because it's a used bushing. But you see it's going to smack up against that other one real hard. So we're going to ream it. This is a 15/16 reamer. And it's just a hand operation. We're just going to take that through. We'll take that through real nice there. Let me get you set up for that. You see we're starting to cut. There's a little few shavings. Just a light cut, just to size these bushings perfectly. And this is another critical step. If you don't want any slop in your sector, you've got to ream this properly with the right size reamer. Early Jeeps used a CJ5 3As, 3Bs, early guys like that. Use a 7/8 shaft. This one is 15/16. Pickup trucks have a 1-inch sector. So you need a bunch of reamers if you're going to do different steering boxes and stuff like that. I've got a whole bunch of them for specific tasks. So there it is. And that's a precision fit. There's no slop at all in that sector. And that is a critical operation. You know, you look at a steering box and you're like, oh, it's tiny, there's only a few pieces in there, what could go wrong? If you don't make the few pieces that are in there right, you'll transmit a whole lot of slop through your steering wheel, and you'll be turning half a wheel to get the wheels to turn a tiny bit. The bushings need to be critical. The bearings and the end play of the tube and worm are critical. I mean, this is your steering box. You don't want any slop in there. Tiniest bit of slop in this box is going to transmit up to the wheel a tremendous amount. Make this perfect and it'll steer like a brand new vehicle. So we'll go over to the bench, we'll clean this out, blow all the chips out, and put the bearings in. Okay, before we go too much further, in your kit you're going to get your new seal. It's a good time to put that in now. That's just going to press in there and then you bang it in. Again, I've got another one of those bushings there, and I'll just drive that in, and then we'll flip it over and we'll start on the bearings. Okay, I'm putting that bottom bearing in there, you can see it. And I just take a heavy punch. I just kind of lightly tap it in there. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to get that seated down in there. Just light taps around the outside, right down through the top. And that's all you need. And now I'm going to swap out these bearings for new ones, and we'll drop those in. And like I said, I've taken 4 boxes apart, and I've picked the 2 nicest tube and worms. So I've got one in the first box. I'm going to put the second best one in here. And again, I would rather use original parts any day compared to any kind of reproduction stuff. So carefully inspect what you got, and you know, if it's in good shape, reuse it. If there was proper lube in the box, there's very remote chance that a lot of stuff got ruined in there. As long as you keep lube in that box, keep the water out, you could come up with a lot of good parts. So let me swap out all these bearings, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, time to put the tube and worm in. I've got my bearings loaded on the top. Here's my lower bearing. We'll just stick that on there, send it right through, and we'll catch this cup so that we don't stress that horn tube. Okay, now that's in there. What we're looking for next, when we put that cap on, we don't want any up-down play like this. We've got to take out every bit and have 0 lash. We don't want to preload these with tension, but we want 0 up-down. Okay? Doesn't matter how many times you got to change the shims around or do whatever you got to do. That needs to spin freely and not move up and down even a thousandth of an inch. This is critical. There's a lot of critical stuff in a steering box. So this is why so many guys complain about their steering. They don't get it right, because you got to take the time to get this right. So we're going to shim. We're going to shim the top of this, and I'll show you a little bit of a few things about the shims, and, and then we'll start shimming this. And again, doesn't matter how many times you got to take that cap on and off. If you got to do it 10 times, do it 10 times. This should spin freely in your hand like this and have no up and down play. Okay, when you get your kit, when you buy your kit out there, you're going to get a package of shims with your kit. And it's going to look like this. You're going to come in a little bag, and you're going to open them up and you think you're going to be able to shim your steering box. Every shim in this package is 7.5 thousandths thick. There's like 6 of them in there. Every single one is the same. So basically what they're saying is you can shim it to within 7.5 thousandths. If it's tight and you need one more shim, maybe you only need 2 thousandths, then you're going to be 5 thousandths too big. If it's loose and you want to take one out, you might put too much preload on it and you won't spin. I don't know why this is like this. I don't think who's ever making this stuff understands how to properly shim something. What I do, and I've got piles and piles of original shims, and I've got them down to 2 thousandths. This little guy right here. I've got 10 thousandths, I got 12 thousandths. That's a 15 thousandths right there. You can't shim this steering box properly without shims that you can adjust in small increments. So the shims go here, and then your cap goes on there like that, and it's a fussy process. You've got to take your time. This is if this moves up when you're steering, or down depending on which way you're steering, your steering wheel, you feel like you're turning a mile before you move an inch. This has to be right, but you can't do it without the proper shims. So I don't know, like with me, I've done hundreds of steering boxes, so I always save the shims, the extra ones. So I have a whole lot of them. But if you don't, you know, you're gonna have to take some shim stock or something and cut your own out, or do something. You gotta get this. You gotta get this right. So I'm gonna fuss around with some shims right now, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's right. Okay, guys, I've had this together and apart a bunch of times, adjusting my shim pack, and it did take some 2 thousandths and 3 thousandths shims to get where I wanted to be. Right now, that shaft will not move up and down. It's firmly seated in the bearings, top and bottom. There's no up-down play, and it still spins freely, perfectly free. You have to shoot for that. No up-down play. That can't move up or down. You pull on it, you know, push it down, try and pick up on it. No play. Zero lash. But no heavy preload on the bearing. Still needs to spin freely in your hands. You know, just needs to. That's exactly what you're shooting for. That's going to transmit power perfectly to your sector, and everything is going to turn as it's supposed to. And like I say, take your time with that. I've had that thing off a bunch of times, and like I say, I use some of these paper thin shims to really dial it in. You can't do it. You can't do it with just 7,000 shims. It's just impossible to do it. You'll be either too tight or too loose. I've never had it work out with a package. So there it is. That's what you're shooting for, and ready for the sector and the cover next. Okay, it's time to get that sector in there, and I'm going to show you the fit. Okay, that's a nice fit. You could try and wiggle that back and forth when you get it in there, and you shouldn't have any movement at all. And you know you've got your bushings reamed to size properly. Now normally when I put a sector, when I'm using the original sector, I'll center punch the back side, and I'll center punch the pitman arm so that that goes on correctly. But I'm using a pitman arm that was loose, and I'm using a new sector, so I don't know exactly where that goes. So I like to leave them loose, and I like to get the steering box mounted in the vehicle, and then so I could get that pitman arm in the perfect spot so we have equal amount of steering left and right. So we'll just put that on loosely with a new nut and stuff, and and when the customer puts it in the vehicle, they can adjust that perfectly. I'm going to put a gasket on there next. And then our cover is going to go on, and I'll show you how I adjust it. And these are our bolts, and I think you might be able to see some sealer I have on there. These holes go right into the housing, so oil could leak out the threads. So make sure you seal your bolts there. And I'll put a little sealer on these top bolts as well, now that we have that adjusted right. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cover on and then show you the procedure for adjusting it. Okay, I've got the box mounted in the vise at just over a 45-degree angle. Depending on your vehicle, you could be anywhere from 42 to 48 degrees on the angle of your steering box. And I like to put it on that angle, and then we are going to fill it with the proper lube right now before I do any of the adjustments. We're going to pull that plug, we're going to put the proper steering box lube. And you guys know I have the correct lube for these boxes. If anybody needs it, I do have it for sale. I'm going to fill this to the fill plug hole, and then I will make the adjustment after I have the lube in the box. I like to have it where everything is lubricated before I start fooling around with it. So I'm going to get it lubed right now, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, I still have the steering gear in operating position, and it's just an old steering wheel and stuck it on the top there. It helps you adjust the shaft better if you can feel the wheel in your hands, and that's always how I like to adjust them. So here we are back at the steering box on the bottom where we're going to make our adjustment. I'll get you in close on that. Okay, now the shaft is just spinning right now. There's no adjustment on it. It's just spinning freely from stop to stop. And what we want when we adjust this box is we want a little slight drag through the center and loose on the ends. So we loosen that nut with a 3/4 wrench. Now we have our screw, and we're going to screw that in. Okay, there's one stop. We'll get out towards the center. There's the other stop. Okay, now right there we're bound up in the center, and the tube and worm is made in such a way where you're straight ahead driving, you're going to have a little more drag than when you're in a turn. So we're going to loosen that. We'll go back to the other stop, and we'll just tighten a little bit and see what we have across the center. Okay, that's not enough drag across the center, so we'll give it another little turn. Okay, we're just starting to get some drag through the center. Again, that's why I like to have the wheel in my hand, because if you're just turning the shaft with your hand, you can't really get the feel for it. So we're just getting some drag through the center. Oops. Let me get you out a little bit. Okay. You can see we're turning the shaft as we're adjusting this. I don't think I got that in the previous shot, but okay, right there is the center, and we have some drag through there. And you want to be loose on the ends. The steering gear is designed in such a way, like I say, where the tube worm is machined, so you'll have a little bit of drag through the center. You don't want to drag your whole way through. Steering wheel won't come back on its own easily through a turn if you have too much drag on it. So you want to be fussy with this like everything else, and get just a slight amount of drag through the center, and then you'll feel it loosen right up as you're going into a turn, basically. So we have it right about there. I like the feel of that. Without changing your adjustment, you want to tighten that nut. Okay. Now, when you can feel that, when you're spinning the shaft and you get towards the center, you see how the shaft was spinning freely? You get to the center and it stops. That's where you want to be. You want to have a little drag through the center. And again, it'll spin to the other stop, come back, and there it stops right in the center. Hope you can see that all right. I get questions all the time about modifying the steering box with that. There's a spring kit out there, and that keeps pressure on your sector all the time. I'm not a fan of that. It might work on some old worn out boxes. If you get your box rebuilt properly, there's no need at all for some kind of spring pressure on your sector shaft. You don't want pressure on that sector when you're in a turn. You want the wheel to come back on its own. I don't know what the purpose of that kit is, but I see a lot of guys using it, and a lot of guys asking me questions on it. I've seen them. I've put them in before on customers that insisted on them. I don't see any benefit when you have a properly built steering box. If you keep the proper lubricant in there, and you don't use heavy grease or whatnot, you keep the proper lube in there, keep it in adjustment. It's the type of thing where every now and again you jack up your front wheels and you want to adjust that again. You know, an old Jeep is just it's a complete manual process. You've got to get under there and lubricate things. You've got to tune it up. You've got to adjust steering boxes, brakes, things like that. It's not a modern car. Don't treat it like one. And that's how you properly adjust a box. And we have absolutely no play at all in our sector shaft, no play at all in the up-down of our tube and worm, and this box will last, you know, another 50 years without any trouble. We have it loaded up with the proper oil and a new sector, properly reamed bushings, and that's how you get this is the beginning stages to good steering on a Willys. There's a lot of guys out there with that death wobble, or that Willys wobble as they call it. Everything needs to be right to keep a Willys going down the road at speed. You need a good steering box. Your drag link needs to be adjusted properly. Your wheel bearings, your kingpin bearings, your tie rods, everything needs to be right on the money. If anything's worn out, you're going to have some problems. If you take it one component at a time and you rebuild everything properly, you'll have good steering for many, many years. So that's the rebuild on one of these early boxes. And I hope you found it informative, or it helps some of you out with the rebuild of your own steering box. And that's about all I have for you today. This is the second box I have finished now for this particular job. And like I say, I'm going to just loosely put the pitman arm on. And when this is in the vehicle, then we'll take it off and put it in the right position and make sure we have steering both ways equally. And I'll get the outer tubes on and things like that. And I believe I have some better steering wheels coming, or he might be putting the steering wheels on himself. But that's wrapped up, and I have transmissions and transfer cases to put together, and a bunch of bench work to do there. And I'm still making some progress on the FC a little bit. There's still a little bit going on with the snowblower Jeep, and I will bring you that stuff on the next video. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.